everybody. It's good to be here today. I recognize that this is probably almost entirely a Yale crowd, and I'm excited to represent Fish's work in the community and my personal and relatively long-standing relationship with him at Squash Haven. So for those of you who don't know, Squash Haven is a youth development program that's based at Payne Whitney, actually, so right in the middle of campus. We provide academic support enrichment, training in the sport of squash, and community service and college placement for about 100 kids in 5th through 12th grades from New Haven Public Schools. We actually have a couple of our team members here today, two of whom were taught by Fish last summer. So just as Fish arrived on campus and as Lily was describing, he plunged into the mayoral campaign. Not surprisingly, he also plunged into other areas of passion for him, one of which is youth and education. And so he very quickly connected with Squash Haven and became one of our weekly tutors in our academic sessions. And I would say sort of over the course of last year, I gradually got to know Fish and gradually got to see that he stood out within obviously at Yale, a community of passionate, talented people who believed in education. And the things I think that I started to notice last year were really twofold. One was that he connected deeply with our kids and was really interested on an individual level in affecting change, sort of one person at a time. But the second was that he had a really, I think, well-developed, particularly for a freshman, interest in the work that we were doing as part of a bigger whole. And so he would frequently pick the brain of my academic director, who was part of the first core of Teach for America teachers in New Haven, and then as I got to know him, would frequently dialogue with him about issues in the city, and particularly issues as they relate to youth serving nonprofits in the city. And I was talking to the Squash Haven kids on the way over and said that I always sort of experienced those conversations much more as someone who was sort of a colleague than someone who is new to the city and new to understanding youth issues. We were really fortunate this past summer. Fish was placed with us as a Presidential Public Service Fellow and was a teaching intern. In that role with us, he worked for about 3 months as a member of the full-time staff, and he taught three courses. One was a daily literacy class, and then the second two were electives on one of Fish's biggest passions. The title of his elective courses were Peacemaking and Social Change. And the culminating project for that, I think, reflected Fish's vision for the capacity for change to begin with the individual. Students identified issues in the city that were of importance to them, made a plan for the way that those issues could be solved, and then presented them to important leaders in the community, including former Mayor John DeStefano, different alders, representatives of the city's youth services department. So a really great success, and I think one that also reflected his connection between the work that's being done with individual kids at programs like Squash Haven and the broader work that can be done at the city level. 5 strengths that I think Fish would bring to the aldership that I'd like to just highlight today. The first is just that he has a really deep affection for the city. I share that affection, and I think it's really genuine with him, and I think as he talks about his experience at Yale, it always sort of begins with Yale in the context of New Haven, and he really sees the positive potential for this city and is really deeply engaged with how he can make that happen both within and beyond his time at Yale. I think the second defining strength I see in Fish is his belief in the positive potential for the relationship between both Yale sort of as an institution and Yale students and the city. I think he has an understanding of sort of the sort of complicated relationship that has been, but sort of an unwavering belief that Yale should be a really positive partner to the city, and that Yale students should be deeply committed, positive partners to work that's being done in the city. The third thing, and this is something that I've seen most intimately at Squash Haven, is his interest in young people, both on an individual level and a policy level. He's been committed, obviously, very deeply in his work at Squash Haven. This summer, he'll be at the Calvin Hill Daycare Center in a policy level, he's just very engaged with issues not only of, we're an organization that serves kids 5th grade and up into college, but he's also really engaged in early childhood education and would just, I think, really sink his teeth into issues of youth on the board and would be a great asset in that area. Fourth defining strength is that he asks a lot of questions, and I think doesn't suppose to know the answers to complicated issues. He's really thoughtful about understanding problems and really understanding that consensus building and community come from understanding a lot of different people and a lot of different backgrounds and a lot of different perspectives. And so just as he's approached his thought about running for Alder by meeting with a lot of people, asking a lot of questions, committing himself to learning as much as possible, I believe that in the role he would ask questions and do a wonderful job of sort of consensus building that's really inclusive and focused on individual voice and agency rather than sort of a top-down model of leadership that supposes to know all the answers. And the last thing I'll highlight is sort of the double strength, his reliability. I think he's clearly not only been an excellent student at Yale, but has maintained a ton of different commitments, and in order to do this position well, would need to be able to juggle a lot of competing demands. And I can say in the 2 years he's been a volunteer with Squash Haven, and he may be our only volunteer who's been able to sustain this, he doesn't miss. Like, it's exams, he shows up. He doesn't sort of back down on his commitments because he has to be a student first. And I think that for him to be able to fill this role effectively, he would need to really be reliable and sort of unrelenting in his commitment to the work and the position. And the last thing I'll say, and this is, I presume that most of you here today know him well, but I think Fish just oozes passion. It's really his positive enthusiasm for the potential for policy and politics to affect change are really contagious, and he's really delightful to be around, and I have never seen that passion waver, and I think it would be something that would be uplifting to the board and something that would make him really just a wonderful and tireless advocate for the board, for Yale, for the city. So those are my reasons for believing that Fish is a really strong candidate for Ward 1, and I'm happy to be here to support him today. And I'm going to turn it over to Fish for some remarks.